you from MikroTik company. I have CITP and MCSA 2012 from Microsoft, and I have CNA certification from Cisco company, and I work for Axis Cameras Gold Partner. My presentation is about DHCP and the first DHCP overview, then DHCP server and DHCP client. After that, implementing DHCP server and DHCP client. And then DHCP FailOver and DHCP relay, and finally DHCP RAW. To begin with, I would like to talk about what is DHCP. And DHCP stands for Dynamic Host Configuration Protocol. That's an important protocol in a network that distributes network parameters to clients on a network. The function of the DHCP is managing and assign network parameters to clients. And the network parameters consist of IP address, default gateway, subnet mask, DNS server, and NTP server. According to this slide in the picture, and DHCP uses well-known port UDP and 67 for DHCP client, DHCP server, and 68 for DHCP client. The number of RFC for DHCP is 2131, and for DHCP option is 2132. The advantages of DHCP is in supporting in a large network. For example, in a large network with 100 or more clients, and the network administrator needs set up and assign manually configuration for each client. But it can be cumbersome and it takes a long time. But with DHCP, you can assign network parameters automatically to clients in a short time. In this slide, I'm going to talk about DHCP server and DHCP client. And DHCP server and DHCP is server and client mechanism. And at the first, I talking about the DHCP server. And the DHCP server is assign and provide service to clients in a network. It means DHCP server store and manage configuration information for DHCP client. After explaining about DHCP server, now I'm telling about DHCP client. And the DHCP client requests network parameters from DHCP server. And I already explained in the previous slide, the network parameters consist of IP address, subnet mask, default gateway, and DNS server. As a result, DHCP client receiving network parameters from DHCP server. And I have a good news for fans of MikroTik. And we can implement both DHCP server and DHCP client on the MikroTik router OS. And in the next slide, I'm going to configuration DHCP server and DHCP client on a MikroTik router OS. And this slide for what is happening for communication between DHCP server and DHCP client. And DHCP uses 4 types of message for communication between DHCP client and DHCP server. The first of message is a discover. Discover is a broadcast message, and at the first, the DHCP client send a message called discover for looking for DHCP servers on a network. Now, the DHCP client doesn't have any IP address or and subnet mask or default gateway, doesn't have any network parameters. In this slide, it is a discover message format, and the source MAC is a client MAC address, and destination MAC is a broadcast address, and the type of protocol is DHCP is UDP, and source IP is 0.0.0.0 on the port 68, and 68 for DHCP client. And destination IP address is 255.255.255.255 on a port number 67, and 67 for DHCP server. The second of message is offer. The offer is DHCP server offer a network parameters to DHCP client, and the offer message format offer this picture. Source MAC is a DHCP MAC address, and this destination MAC is a broadcast address, and the type of protocol is a UDP, and source IP is a DHCP IP address on a port 67, and destination IP is a 255.255.255.255 on a port 68. The third of message is a request, and the DHCP client accepts network parameters from the DHCP server, and the format is this picture. The source MAC is a client MAC address, and destination MAC is a broadcast address. The protocol is UDP, and source IP 0.0.0 on a port 68. At the final destination IP is 255.255.255.255 on a port number 67. The final message is an acknowledgement, and it is a final, and the DHCP server confirm and send network parameters to the DHCP client. No, the DHCP client has network parameters and has IP address, subnet mask, default gateway, and maybe network time server. The acknowledge format is a source MAC is a DHCP MAC address, and the destination MAC is a broadcast address, and the protocol is UDP, and the source IP is a DHCP IP address on a port 67, and destination IP is 255 and 255.255 and .255 on a port 67. This part is practical. In this part, I would like to configuration DHCP server in a MikroTik. Before configure DHCP server in a MikroTik, you should observe some tips. The first tip is interface must have an IP address. And the second tip is the interface mustn't join to a bridge. And third tip is for each interface, there can only DHCP server. For implementing a DHCP server, and first open Winbox, and then in menu, according to number 1, select IP. Then DHCP server is number 2, and number 3 is DHCP setup for configuration DHCP server. According to the slide, after open Winbox in the menu, and then you select the interface that run the DHCP server. For example, excuse me. In a number 1, you select the interface and that run interface DHCP server. For example, Ether 1 or Ether 2. After that, the MikroTik detect a network address for clients. And the number 3, MikroTik select the default gateway for clients on a network. And number 4, you should set a range of IP address for a DHCP client. In number 5, you should set one or more DNS server for clients on a network. And number 6 is a list time for clients. And finally, you could configure the DHCP server on a MikroTik router OS. After that, we can use MikroTik router OS as a DHCP client. Maybe MikroTik interface connect to a DHCP server and want receiving network parameters from a DHCP server. For configuration DHCP client, after open Winbox and select IP number 1, and after that number 2 DHCP client, the number 3 at DHCP client. In the interface part, you can select the interface that connect to a DHCP server and wants receiving network parameters from DHCP server, and with use per DNS, and DHCP client get DNS server address from DHCP server, and use per NTP, and DHCP client once receiving time server address from the DHCP server. The DHCP option, for example, every DHCP option has a code. For more information about the code, you can see in URL. And at default route port, you can add a route to MikroTik. And then finally, and default route distance, can specify a distance of a default route. In this part, I would like to talk about DHCP FailOver. And we create additional DHCP server on the network. If a first DHCP server fail or out of service, the second of DHCP server provides service to clients on a network. But the configuration, both of DHCP must be similar. At the first, we create to DHCP server with a similar configuration. For example, range of address must be similar. According to this slide, we have two DHCP server and DHCP server 1 and DHCP server 2. In delay threshold is down is primary. If delay threshold is up is secondary. If DHCP server 1 is failed or out of service, DHCP server can provide to clients on a network. At this part, I would like to talk about a DHCP relay. When DHCP server and DHCP client are into different network and there is a router between them, when a DHCP client sends a discover message and requesting network parameters, DHCP server cannot receive discover message from DHCP client. Why? Because the type of discover is a broadcast and the router doesn't allow the broadcast, but don't worry about it. With DHCP relay, after implementing DHCP relay on a MikroTik router, and DHCP client first sends some message, broadcast message for DHCP relay, and DHCP relay send a message for DHCP server. As a result, DHCP client can obtain new network parameters from DHCP server without problem. How does implementing DHCP relay on a MikroTik router OS? At the first, open Winbox and in the menu select IP, then DHCP relay according to number 2, and number 3 you add DHCP relay. In the name part, you set a name, for example, relay 1. In the interface, interface part, you must select interface that connect in a client. According to a slide, Ether 1 connect to client. And in the DHCP server part, you should set a DHCP server IP address, and like picture in 192.168.100.1. In the delay threshold part, you set a time, and it's useful when you have two DHCP server in a network. And in the local address port, you must enter IP address that set for other that connect to client according this picture and 192.168.2000 and .1. And finally, client could receive network parameters from the DHCP server. And at the moment, the DHCP client has IP address. And the DHCP are unsafe and unsecure service in a network and should be trusted. And the DHCP server is very much attacked. The types of attack in DHCP are DHCP spoofing, RAF DHCP, and Trojan DHCP. In this part, I would like to talk about DHCP RAF and RAF DHCP that works on authorized in a network. When DHCP client sends a discover and looking for DHCP server, the RAF DHCP request offer for client, and client accept this request. And finally, DHCP client communicate with RAF DHCP. And how to prevent from RAF DHCP? In the open Winbox, and then select IP according number 1 and number to select DHCP server, and the DHCP server and the authoritative part is set yes. And the number 4, number 3, you can select alerts, and then you add a DHCP alert. Then interface, you can set interface that connect, that run DHCP server. In the valid server, you should enter a valid DHCP server. Thank you very much. I hope you are enjoying.
Thank you very much. So the last presentation will be from Mohammed Razavi.